conversation. And today we'll be talking about Alzheimer's. You know, Alzheimer's affect 5.4 millions of Americans each year. So here today to speak about Alzheimer's, we have Julie Dusing, and she is going to talk with us about Alzheimer's. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. I feel very honored to have you here with us today.
Thank
you.
So
tell us, what is Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's is primarily a disease, and it affects, as you said, over 5.4 million Americans. It is a disease that affects the brain, usually first noticed by short-term memory losses. And we have a whole program that we do on Know the 10 Warning Signs of the disease. Many times people will ask me, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And I always describe it that dementia is like an overall umbrella. It's like the umbrella of fruits or vegetables, and underneath that umbrella are all the different kinds of fruits or cancers or vegetables, whatever it is that we're talking about. Dementia is the umbrella, and 70% of dementias is Alzheimer's. It's the Alzheimer's disease. Then there's other things like Lewy body or frontal temporal disease or mixed dementias or vascular dementia. I could go on and on. There's a lot of different other dementias that fall under that umbrella. So Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and it is a disease that affects usually women more than men, simply because women live longer.
Now, what causes Alzheimer's? Because it was my understanding that Alzheimer's is due to some type of plaque buildup in the brains that destroys your brain cells, which brings on dementia, like you spoken earlier about the memory loss and other kind of things. So, but what can we add to that so people that's watching back home will be able to understand what Alzheimer's really is?
Yeah, I think that is the question: is what causes it? And we really don't know. The scientists and the researchers are really looking for the biomarkers to tell us who may or may not get the disease down the road. We're not there yet. That's why research is so very, very important. But what we do know is exactly what you said, is that brain cells are dying. There's plaques and there's tangles, and what happens inside the brain is that the neuron is cut off and dies. And the neuron is really what is the transmitter to tell that neuron. There's a signal that comes up, tries to connect here to get to the correct place to tell the body what to do, for instance, to breathe, to speak, to move, whatever it might be. Alzheimer's starts in a certain part of the brain, and it's not always in the same place for everybody. So depending on the part of the brain that is being affected by these plaques and tangles and by the neurons dying off is where we'll start to see things like short-term memory loss. We may start to see things like gait or balance is affected. Language could be affected. Things like being able to remember words or phrases or games or rules or whatever. It just depends on where in the brain the disease is affecting it. So that's kind of my little non-medical way of describing it. It's neurons that are dying off because of all the plaques and tangles that are in the brain and being affected.
Okay. Now, can it affect any other organs in the body?
It's primarily a brain disease, but what happens, and people don't understand this, Alzheimer's is really a progressive disease, and it is one that goes downhill. No one recovers from Alzheimer's. There is no survival rate with Alzheimer's. It is eventually a fatal disease. And what happens is that people either die of the disease or complications of the disease. So sometimes people will have trouble breathing, or it may be complications with pneumonia or heart problems or diabetes or vascular problems. There's all kinds of things that could enter into the picture, but eventually the brain starts, the cells start dying, and our brain stem is where all of our swallowing, breathing, eating, all of those impulses are there. And when those neurons are no longer existing in that part of the brain, it can't give the command to do what it needs to do. Swallow, breathe, eat.
So it can become a very scary situation for an individual, who's going, through this. What are some of the steps that we should know in understanding Alzheimer's?
I'm going to talk a little bit about know the 10 warning signs. I thought today might be a good educational tool, and I'm going to refer down to them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we do a whole program. We have online e-learning courses that are called Know the 10 Warning Signs. But for any of us over a certain age, we all start to be concerned. Oops, was that a slip, or is this a problem that I need to worry about? So we all are kind of talking about that. And I know someone who's in their 30s who has Alzheimer's. So it's not just Alzheimer's disease. It's not somebody that's older. It can affect people of all ages. So I think one of the first things that we talk about all the time is memory loss. It's short-term memory. Learning and forgetting something that you just heard or learned. That's short-term memory. Number 2 could be challenges in planning or solving problems. Somebody who's always been very good at taking a problem solving, thinking it through, all of a sudden now they can't do that. They can't process in the same way. So that can be a problem. Number 3 would be difficulty completing familiar tasks. Following a normal recipe, making the batch of cookies that you've done from memory all of your life, and all of a sudden you use a cup of salt instead of a cup of sugar. And those cookies aren't going to taste very good, So things that were always familiar and easy for you to do now become more difficult, or you can't do them. Number 4 would be something like confusion with time or place. A lot of times people will ask the same thing over. What day is it today? What time is it today? They're not understanding that you just told them it's Thursday, and they're asking again. So it's just confusion, some major confusion that sets in.
Sometimes we kind of see this with patients who suffer from Down syndrome. They don't know the time of days, and I mean, not time of days, but they don't know the time of the hour, and then they also don't know the days of the week.
Yes, and it's interesting that you brought up Down syndrome, because someone who lives long enough with Down syndrome will get Alzheimer's disease. So they are linked very closely. So that makes sense with what you're saying, Number 5 would be understanding. They have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Things like being able to see correctly, being able to understand that the border of black around the carpet isn't a deep hole that they're going to fall into, and be afraid to walk over that piece of carpet because it's a different color. Spatial relationships and things become very confusing to them. And number 6 would be like new problems in speaking and writing. Word finding is huge, even with someone who has mild cognitive impairment, which is sometimes can be, someone can have some deficit cognitively before they're even into Alzheimer's disease. And we've heard someone speak recently, and she said that the hardest thing for her was she was a journalist, and she was struggling to find the word. And her whole life, 40 years of a career, had been finding words and putting just the right word into an article. So that becomes problematic for someone. They can't find the word, they can't remember it, they can't bring it to their mind when they need to, when they're trying to, converse with someone. And number 7 would be misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. We see that a lot. Have you lost your keys lately? Have you ever lost your keys? Okay. What do we do when we lose our keys? We retrace our steps, don't we? We go back and we think, all right, when did I last drive the car? What was I wearing? Which jacket? Where did I put it? And we retrace back. Someone who loses their keys with a disease may find the keys and then not be exactly sure what to do with them.
Right. They forget why they were
exactly why did I need these? What do I do with them? Where do I put them? A lot of people have trouble with driving anyway, and we had a lady who found her keys, and she sat in the car and didn't know what to do with the keys. And she sat there for 15 minutes, and she was on her way to the grocery store, could not remember what to do with the keys. So that's a warning sign, okay? Number 8 would be decreased or poor judgment. And you hear a lot, and you may have had people on your show concerning senior scams, people who are taking advantage of seniors. Right. Seniors who have poor judgment in that they are writing checks to everyone who is asking or is needy or is a great salesperson or someone on TV asking for money. We heard of a lady who exhausted her entire bank account within 6 months. Whoa. Before her kids picked up on, oops, warning sign, okay? So to be careful of that poor judgment and how they're thinking. Number 9 would be withdrawal from work or social activities. Basically, this is where folks who have always been outgoing, love to be around people, now all of that becomes very confusing to them. It's noisy, they can't participate in conversation in the same way, and they start drawing back and wanting to remain at home where they feel safe, and it kind of becomes a comfort zone for them. And number 10, we went through these really fast, but number 10 is changes in mood and personality. And we're talking about someone who has always been sweet and dear and lovable and little church lady that wouldn't hurt a flea. When she gets the disease, can swear like a sailor. You know,
Right.
all of a sudden, that total personality and mood swings. We've also heard about the abusive, not so nice, ornery person who gets the disease and turns into a teddy bear. So you have the two different spectrums there.
It can go either way.
It can. And not everybody has all 10 of these. That's not the point. What we want to make sure is that people understand that these are the top 10 warning signs. If you start to see 1, 2, or 3 of these in yourself or in a loved one, it's time to go to the doctor. It's time to get a professional assessment. It's time to put together a medical team if you are diagnosed with this disease, and then start putting plans into place for your remaining years and how you want those to play out.
Now, is there any preventative stages that we can discuss that can help warn out before this disease attack them? Of course, no one really knows if this disease will actually, come about in your life. But you never know.
You don't know.
You never know what the outcome will come about.
And one of the things that I say to people, we used to do a program called Maintain Your Brain, and we don't do that any longer because people think, well, if I do this, 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 and this, you said do this, 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 and this, that will keep me from getting the disease. Right. And we don't know what causes it, therefore we don't know totally how to prevent it. Right. But on a personal side, I feel very strongly that lifestyle choices can make a difference just to be overall healthy. And brain healthy equals heart healthy. If there are heart healthy foods, they're brain healthy foods too, because they're very closely connected. So there are things that I think that we can do with exercise, everything in moderation, eating correctly. You know, we can go into all the leafy green vegetables and all those things that we used to talk about. But just because you do all of that doesn't mean it's going to prevent the disease. We wish we knew what caused it so that we could be more preventative in our approach.
So there's not really too many treatment plans, you know, to treat this illness.
There really isn't. In fact, one of the saddest things to me is that in the last 10 years, there has not been another FDA-approved medication for the disease. And the disease does not have a medicine that will cure it. It's the only disease. We're the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. The other 5 have all seen a decrease in the numbers of death. We're the 6th, and the graph goes this way. We see an increase in the disease, whereas in the other fatal diseases, we're starting to see some cures or some medicines or some things that are helpful for those diseases. That's why, as the population ages, we really are not in a position to really be able to handle all of what's coming down the road with this disease. So, you know, I'm passionate about finding a cure. And in order to find a cure, it takes the funds for research. And that is just so very important that we advocate to our legislators, that we find people who understand that this disease and the cure takes money, time, and researchers who are willing to put their lives on the line to be able to find what we need to prevent this disease.
Now,